And also, since we have a group call and we've got a great group of people here, drop your name and firm name in the chat. I'm sure others would love to know where you're calling in from, where you're located, and you guys can connect over that outside of this. I think we could do a better job of creating community here at Materio. So I would love for y'all to be able to connect. All right, so can I get a thumbs up from someone? Can you see my screen? We good? All right. So I'm going to minimize so I don't see your faces. So if you say anything, either unmute or drop it in the chat and we will go from there. But I think what I wanted to do is sort of go through how you might use this as a design firm, especially from the beginning, and just sort of, see where we go, see where we get from here. I know a lot of you have probably already been in the system. This is a deep dive training call, so some of this may feel redundant. It may be new to others. I've already got a project here. I'm not going to go through sort of outlining the scope of work necessarily from the very beginning, but I did want to go into how you might start to communicate with your client in Materio before you're really ready to share with them everything. So what I'm actually going to do is show you how, first off, you can turn your scope off for clients. So I'm going to come to the gear right here and I'm going to select hide from my clients. And you'll notice that this little draft tag shows up at the top of your scope of work. Now, the reason I think this is important to know that it's there, it's not always necessary, but if you are working on more of space planning or you're actually working on floor plans with your clients, I think it's important to be able to invite them into Materio much earlier and not feel the pressure of having that scope of work over here on the left. So when you do that, and then when you view as your client, you'll notice that your client is really only seeing this floor plan or any visuals that you've decided to show to them at the bottom. So with that, that gives you a little bit of flexibility around how you can communicate with them and not stress over the fact that you may not have your estimate or your scope of work fully built out. So one way I think a lot of designers want to start in the system is to bring in concepts. Let's create concept boards or pull them in from another system. Let's upload initial sketches or drawings of floor plans, and then let's communicate with our clients about those. So I would definitely still recommend uploading those floor plans, hiding your scope of work if you're not ready to share that with them yet, but going ahead and getting them into the system and get them in the rhythm of communicating with you. So also you'll notice that I have this kitchen inspiration board that I have built out. All of you may or may not have boards on your account. I apologize that I didn't check before this, but this is something that we can add to your account. It's in sort of an early testing phase right now. It should be launched in the next couple of weeks fully. But this is a way for you to come in and create boards for your clients. So you can pull in images like I've done here. You can also create boards with products that you've added into the system. So you'll notice I've got some bathroom products in here. We'll create another board later. But at the beginning of a project, this is really about look and feel, where are we going with this project, and how can we get them, bought into the vision of this, and make sure that when we go to start sourcing products and making design decisions, that we feel like we kind of have a grasp of what our client wants. So we can use this board function to do that. And then your clients can come in and communicate with you. They can comment directly on these boards so they could give you feedback on them. And then also, like we mentioned before, you can have them come in and communicate with you about this. So you might say, what do you think about an island this big, right? Or whatever the communication needs to be. You can also use this as an internal tool. So if you're maybe the lead designer and you have someone else on your team that is doing the drafting work, or maybe you're working even with an architect outside of the system, you could come in and comment and change this, click change. You'll see if I click that, go back and forth. This is going to be a private conversation, so your client is not going to see this. And you might want to give some feedback on this. So like remove the furniture from this plan. We're not ready to show anything like that. So this is a great way for you to communicate internally with team members if you're wanting to sort of work on space planning or floor plans or even concepts prior to inviting the client in, and then also inviting them in to work with you on this. Now, once we get to a place where we feel like we are moving in the right direction, we've got a floor plan we're ready to show, we've got some things we want to show, we can go in and publish the scope to our clients, and can also turn on certain pages. So you'll notice down here at the bottom, I've got this page turned off. And I've got these before photos turned off as well. This is a way for you to also control what your client may or may not see, especially in the beginning of the project when you're wanting to sort of have this presentation moment with them, possibly. You can kind of turn these off and on using this little eye symbol. And so that's another way that you might work on concepts together as a team, and then you might turn that on to your client. Now, once I decide that I am ready to share this with my client, I can come in here and I will publish the scope to the client. It's going to notify them, that's optional. You could turn it off. And this is where you would send a message sort of for a second time, initiating the conversation about the scope is ready. We're excited to share this with you. We're excited to get you in here and get your feedback. Maybe we've got products in here. We've got sort of at least a vision for what's going to go into this and what it's going to cost. So that would sort of be the next step, would be publishing this to your clients. Now, we can take this a few different ways. I think firms do this, everybody has a little bit of a different method. My advice is always to have at least, something scoped out and somewhat priced. It doesn't have to be exact here. And of course, I didn't enable the selection. One thing that is rather new, if you're pretty new to the system, is that when I go into add an item, this new little selection button right here is going to make it easier to add in items, and it's going to enable that selection by default. So if you're really, really new to Materio, you might not even understand this concept yet, but in the system, we have the idea of selections, and that's going to show up over here in your selections workspace. That means you can add products to it. And then we have just items. Those could be labor items or service items or things that you don't need decisions on. So this is going to make it really easy to add in selections really fast in a quick order and go ahead and have that on. Now you'll also notice I'm just pressing enter and I can type in those really fast. So I might want to do pendants, and I might want to do those, over the island here. This is just going to be the basic stuff that you really need to have sort of set up before you decide to share the scope of work with your client. Now, I know we've talked to different firms who also like to source product, and maybe they're not ready to put an estimate here. That's okay as well. That's not really how Materio is designed at the moment, but it is possible that as long as you have, a selection outlined here, you can go ahead and start to pull products in for that. So it's definitely an option, but at a minimum, let's have our items in there. Let's have these marked on the floor plans so that when our clients come in, they can really understand, where this is going, and where the dollars are going, where their money's going to be spent, and then also what it's really going to take to do their project. So as I start to estimate these out, this is going to give me a great idea for what it's going to cost. Sorry, we've got our scope of work here. We've published it to our clients. We feel really confident in the ideas that we've got a floor plan we're really liking. We're understanding the concepts. Our clients are able to come in and see all of that here, and really feel like they're, wow, everybody's so organized. We've got this. We're ready to go. The next step would be to actually start to pull product. Now, if you're trying to do a full-on sort of design presentation at the beginning, you might find yourself wanting to pull in those products earlier before you present to your client for the first time. And that is okay, right? Like that's totally fine. We always err on the side of caution when, wasting time, but a lot of firms find that can be really helpful for sort of selling a vision. So that's totally an option. In that case, what you would do is just come over to your selections workspace and you're going to start pulling in products. Now, whether you do that, whether you have a bunch of products in here already, or you're sort of maybe pulling from, maybe you're pulling new things in or sort of scoping new things out, this is going to give you the ability to pull these options in really quickly, and then we can put them on a board. So I'm actually going to pull in some products here. So let's say that I'm just doing a bathroom on this project. We'll keep it simple. I have some product here. I also already have some products that are confirmed here. But this is going to allow me to come into Materio and create a board with those products. So this is really what I would say would be the moment of, if you want to present those products as a true sort of vision or presentation at the beginning, towards the beginning of the client relationship, um, this is how you would do it. And this can be done in different phases. So don't feel like you have to be married to doing it at the beginning or necessarily doing it at the end. So I can come in, I'm going to add products, and I'm just going to pull in everything for this bathroom. Let's say that I want to make a board for, the bathroom. So it's going to load in all of my products. Now, this is one thing I think we're working on right now, which I personally think needs to be fixed, which is sort of these can't overlap right now. So they're a little bit rigid in their behavior. That should change in the coming week or so. But I can come in and I can start to sort of organize these. I can, fit them however I like. You may not want to show the sink. It may not be important. You may not want to show the toilet, right? But you might want to show just the finishes and sort of the overall look and feel of these. Another thing that we will be adding in the next week or two will be text to the boards. It's been a big request. So know that that is coming, and that will give you a little bit more of an ability to spell things out for your client. For now, this is sort of what we can do with the system. You can fit these. Now, if you have multiple options, none of these do right now, a little box will show up when you hover that says option, and you can toggle through those options. So if you wanted to present to your client 2 scenarios for the bathroom, you could do all with option 1 and then generate another board, or put them side by side on this board with option 2. So all of that is a possibility. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to call this bathroom board option 1. And I'm going to save it. So this is going to give me the ability to sort of visualize these products together. And this also links to the items in your scope of work. So these aren't just images at this point. These are actually connected to the scope that you've created. Now, would love to hear feedback. You could drop it in the chat if you have ideas or thoughts about this. But we know that there's definitely a moment in time where you just want to pull a bunch of products. You don't want to have to put them on scope maybe, and you just want to kind of throw them on a board. We've heard that, totally understand it. So if you feel like you agree with that, or if you have other thoughts about how you might use boards, drop that in the chat. I would love to hear it. But now that I have this board, it is, a way for me to kind of showcase this bathroom to my client. So what you would do in this case is scope out your work, create each board for each room, or maybe you put the half bath next to, or the bath next to the girls' bedroom, or whatever, right next to each other. However you want to organize it, you can do that here. And then you would share the options with your client. I'm going to check the chat. Yeah, so Claire's asking if the boards are going to be more easily editable. Yes, that is my hope. Like I mentioned, I feel like the usability is poor. This is why we haven't released it to everyone. So I know this week, the team that's working on that is improving some of those elements. I don't want to overpromise. I'm never supposed to do that. But I feel like we've had a lot of requests for sort of overlapping and adjusting. So the hopeful answer is yes. And I'm not sure if you've played around with that yet, but I feel like it is, it's something that I definitely feel like it's just not, it's not ready to ship to everyone. So hopefully we can get that in order in the next week or so. So once I've started to, we're thinking sort of about the entire process here. I've gone through the space planning. I've been communicating with my clients. I'm getting them warmed up to this idea that I have this system, that we're communicating through, and they have a place to go to sort of see details. Now we're starting to actually pull products in, and it's the exciting moment where they may have even seen them, on these boards. Technically, these don't have to be approved for your client to see them. So this is a great way if you don't want to approve a bunch of things, or if you don't want to send them for approval yet, you can sort of get the okay or the go ahead using comments on these boards. And then you would come over to the selections workspace and actually send these over. So I might filter down and say, I just want to send, things that are in the bathroom over to my client. And they've already approved some of these things, so you're not going to see them all here, but it's going to move them over. And as you know, this is going to move over to the awaiting approval workspace. This is going to be a place for them to come in and approve them as they're making these decisions. Of course, I'm doing it from the firm side here, so I'm seeing a lot more information. But as they're making these decisions, they're going to see these other products that they've already made choices on down here. So again, it's not seeing that board, but it is seeing kind of the context of all of the items in one place as they're making those decisions. So then they would approve all of this, and that's going to move it over to the confirmed workspace. So just like normal, again, I'm sure I'm just repeating this and you've all heard it, but this is going to move those items through the process. And at this point, from a client perspective, they've made, a choice to approve it. This is the moment where it really is time for you to, go in and order it while you feel like, this is the right choice, and they've made the decision and it's ready to go. Now let's talk about how, if you wanted to get this outside of the system to a client, and you can actually do this prior to sending approval. You can do that by coming to your selections workspace and exporting it. So this isn't going to create necessarily a really, really beautiful print presentation, I would say. I think that's something we've thought about. But right now it's going to get it out the door, where if you wanted to sit down with them in a meeting, you wanted to pick up a physical sample, put it in front of them with the paper next to it, or even open up Materio as sort of a documentation tool, you definitely could do that. You're going to come over to this export here. And when you click print, you're going to have a few options. And I guess actually I kind of skipped over quoting. We can go back and talk about that in a moment, but this is where you could sort of use this as a presentation tool for them. Now, if you're wanting to show prices to them on this, you can also just select show prices, and then you could filter by the statuses. If you haven't yet sent them to your client, you would want to just do the need selection and the awaiting approval. This is going to export anything that's in those open spaces, anything that you may have multiple options on is going to show up. In this case, everything we want to show has already been selected. So I'm just going to say everything. I could also do it by, for instance, bathroom, and then I could print this out. So what this is going to do is print out the bathroom, and it's going to print out all of the pictures. It's going to give some information, lead time, etc., and plus their price plus tax. So you can use that as a way to sort of put that in front of them and look at the budget. Now, one thing this isn't going to do, and this might be a hiccup for some of y'all, happy to hear it in the chat, is this isn't going to give them a total. So a lot of times designers want to present sort of a proposal or a presentation that has a grand total on it. That would have to be done sort of through our invoicing structure or through the scope export right now as a bit of a workaround. But you can get this information out. You could print it by location and have those printed out and sort of ready to go. You could even do it with those mood boards, product boards beside it, and then have your physical samples together. So it's kind of all organized. I really encourage, though, that printing is not necessary when it comes to client presentation. If you really wanted to opt into sort of presenting with paper, you can, but I think that you can do that using Materio. Now, granted, we don't have this, beautiful presentation view, I don't think at the moment, but you can come in and you can go full screen on these floor plans and on these rooms, especially once we get that text in there next week. This is going to be a great tool to sort of walk through these boards with your clients, to talk through them in person. So you could open this up, sort of hides other information, and you could walk through it with them, in Materio. Now, when it comes to actually showing them products, you're just going to want to make sure that you come in and you view it as the client. That way, if there's any sensitive pricing information, they're not seeing anything that might be sensitive depending on how you've shared it with them. So that's all I would say there. Let's see, we've got a chat that makes sense. Yes. And right now, the boards can be either used for photos that you pull in or for products and materials. So that's definitely an option. We could also, I can start a new board from scratch. I didn't go over this one was already created, but if we created a board and we wanted to add in photos, like I could come in and add, all 5 of these at the same time, pull them in, pull in the images. And this is where you might want to say, okay, this is going to be kind of the central image that I want to showcase. Maybe this one, I want to feature, more. Let's pull this one down. And this is where the editability is sort of a little bit in early access, if you will, right now. But you can kind of pull these in and arrange them as you want to and sort of create that concept board. Now, with this, you could screenshot and save products. We're working on a way for you to pull in inspiration a little bit easier. But at the moment, these are just photos that I've saved on my computer. So if you wanted to present concepts with product, you could, in theory, just save those as screenshots. But obviously, we have a system here that allows you to clip things really easily. And so it also is lined up with scope of work, which is obviously decisions you're going to show them. So that would be the only reason that I would say that you would want to do it that way. So I'm going to save this board. Now, the other thing I wanted to note, and sort of just as you're setting up your project and as you're clipping products into your design library and as your team's doing this, I don't know if any of y'all have seen this yet. We just made some recent updates to the clipper. More updates to come on this. But I think one thing that's really great that we've done is when you clip the products now, you actually have internal notes, which is new. And then also you can add in the attachments really easily from, and I may have picked a terrible example because I don't know if they have a spec sheet on this one. They might not. Let me go to another one that I know has a spec sheet. But now you can actually pull in the tear sheets or installation instructions on items really easily using the clipper, which wasn't there before. And I think that's a really big time saver because you're not having to download them and re-add them. So now when I clip, it might pull in different, images for me. I can categorize this. And then when I come down here, I can put an internal note. So maybe I want to put this as an internal note so my client doesn't see it. Maybe I want to change this to just call it, Silver Art Light. This is client facing, the product name at the moment. So you may want to change that if you're worried about that. But then when I come down here, let's find a spec sheet. I can just right click and then do Materio Attach File. You can also move this over. We can do add the install guide, etc. So you'll see that those have attached right there, which just makes it much faster to pull in those products. And you can also clip another item on this page. So let's say you wanted to clip a different variant. You can now do that much easier than before. So I just wanted to call out those updates. If you guys have been in here for a little while, those are new and are definitely what I would consider really helpful. All right, so beginning to end, we're sort of walking through a project. And I feel bad because I know some of you know all this already, so I just don't want to be totally redundant. But as we are moving through the process, we have created those concept boards, we've created those product boards, we've run that by our client, and we're getting to the point where we're starting to get ready to order things. We want to invoice in the system and purchase orders. And you know what, that reminds me, I told you guys I would tell you how to quote things, and I didn't do that. So let's do that. So in Materio, backing up a little bit, and I apologize that I kind of skipped over this before. What you want to make sure that you're doing, obviously, is when you add in products or when you're adding in anything. This could be, labor, subcontractor labor, or materials. This could be products. You want to make sure that you're getting a quote on that. And oftentimes you're going to do that before you present it to your client. I mean, you may have a great understanding of what things generally cost, but especially before you sort of sign up with those subcontractors or invoice, you want to make sure that those are in here. So let's just go ahead and add a scope item. We'll call this electrical labor. We're going to uncheck that because we don't want it to be a selection. And let's just say it's going to be $5,000 flat rate, and we're just going to charge a 10% markup on that. So we've got our electrical labor here, and then we have these sconces and pendants here. Now, if you have a product on these items, it's going to ask you to quote that. So if it's a selection, let me back up. If it's a selection, when you add a quote, it's only going to let you do that if you have a product, because Materio is expecting that if you plan to put a product there, you have to have one there to quote. So if I go into add a quote, you'll notice that the pendant there is there that I have an actual product for, and then the labor. But otherwise, these other items that I don't have an actual product for, it's not even offering me the ability to quote that. Now, if I wanted to add a quote in, let's just say we're doing it for the labor, this is going to be for the item itself. If I went and put in, a cost of labor on these items, so if I said this was going to be $100 of labor per fixture here, then it's going to show up a little bit of a different way. I just want to show you all that as well. So when I go in and quote, if I decided to do this fixture, I could say it was for the item and also for the install labor, or and it would estimate that component for me, or I can come in and just say that it's for the labor and the item itself. So there's a few ways that you can do that. And I'm going to upload just a sample receipt here. You're going to be able to look at it, and then you're going to be able to confirm the prices here. So maybe it's $48.90, and I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to add in my vendor here, when it was quoted and when it expires, and I'm going to save it. Now, right now, my client facing, quote for this or price for this is $5,500. If I wanted to come in and say, yep, I'm going to use Will and he's going to do the work for this, and I want to approve it. When I approve it, this is the place where you have the ability to override that client price. So if you wanted to pass that lower cost along to your client, you would leave this toggled on, and it's going to let you know that it's going to change from $5,000 to $480. But if you didn't want to pass that along and you wanted to keep it as it is, you could just leave it unchanged, and you could still approve this quote for this vendor. I'm going to pass the cost along, and then I'm going to close out of it. And you'll see that it still has my markup on it. So it's just going to be changing the cost. So just know that when you update the cost, it's literally updating just the price, the cost of goods for that. It's not going to change your markup. It's not going to override that. It's going to come in as a quote. Now, if you ever need to review the quotes, they're by category here. You can see that I have one approved quote here. You can always reopen this or add multiple quotes for doing the electrical labor and decide later on which one you want to use. Now, when it comes to actually adding in a quote for the product, this is where you would want to bring in, that quote from the vendor and put it here. So you can do this in two ways. You could share a vendor export with them and email it over to them. You could also technically use our send a PO workflow and get them to just send you a quote that way. That's a little bit of a more formal method, but if you feel really confident in the pricing that you've put in, that's one way that you can do it. So I'm going to upload a quote here, again, just an example. And then I'm going to come in and confirm the price of what it was. If I had any tax on it, I could save it and then wrap it up. This was from, I think, Visual Comfort. And then when it was quoted, when does it expire, again, save that. And then again, if I approve it, it can change that cost. So I might not want to do that on this one, and I'm just going to approve the quote. But that's the way that you can come in and quote labor. You can quote actual products, and you can apply those quotes to the products so that when you go to invoice, everything is going to be stemming from, this field. Now, I'm not going to dive deep into this today. I might cover this in next week's training session, but we are about to ship under this orders tab. We're going to ship a way for you to actually do the POs for work orders, for subcontractors. And so right now, all the POs in our system are kind of rigid and also very much for vendors of product, but we're actually redoing this, and we will be opening up this probably in the next week or so for everyone. And this is going to be a really flexible way to come in, create POs for anything, add items, and customize. So I'm really excited to see that coming soon. All right. I'm getting some questions here, so I want to go through those. Do you have to do each one individually, or can you do this as a group? We get plumbing package altogether to the, yeah, so you don't have to do it individually. I was just trying to keep the example kind of simple. But when you add in a quote, you can select all the items if they're there in your project, and you can add them. And then Jen asked, can you add a quote that has multiple items on one quote and assign multiple items to one quote? I think I just answered that, Jen. Yeah, okay. I was like, I think I just answered that. But basically, yes, you can do that for multiple items. Again, when I'm doing these examples, I try to keep them simple because I'm already talking a lot. But you can come in, and if you had, let's just say let's just put some products on here really quick so we can see. Let's actually do these two options here. So we've got these two options here from the same vendor on this quote. And then if we wanted to come in and add a quote for this, you would see that both of these lights are there. So you can do both of those items. You can put both of them in. And if you did that, and let's just say, we'll upload our example really quick, confirm that. I want to see, it would be nice to see the prices here of what we originally did. So let's just say this is like 1450 and 980. I don't remember what they were, to be honest. Then put these in, save the quote. And if I wanted to approve these and override both of these prices, when I override the prices, so let's say I got the actual quote from the vendor, the price has changed, they both went up in price, and I'm going to approve that. Now, when you go to look at these items, those prices that are here are going to reflect that approved quote. So that's the idea. You get the quote, you approve it, and it actually applies onto the selections. Most of time when you're working with product and a price goes up or down, in the quoting phase, you're going to approve that to push onto the products because the idea is that you want to present to your client the most accurate price. So hopefully I didn't royally confuse everyone, and that makes a lot of sense. So that is how you would do that. Can you set standards for markup and tax for each project versus inputting individually? Yes. So we don't have a global setting. So we don't have like a company-wide setting for projects for like markup and tax. That is typically going to be per project. And the reason we do that is oftentimes we hear that, well, with this client, I decided to structure it this way, and this client's an old client, so we're going to structure it this way or give a different kind of, markup or discount. So it's all very flexible. When you start a project, you're going to be asked to set up those rates, but you can also come to this gear icon right here, and you can click the edit default rates. Now, this is going to allow you to set up markup on all four of these cost components. So I could say I want to do 50% on every item. Client tax is going to be 9%. Now, one thing you can't do right now, which you may be wondering about, is can I set up a different markup per category? So for instance, for all electrical, I want to mark it up 60%, or even more specifically for visual comfort, I want to mark it up 70%, and on another vendor, I want to mark it up 20%. At the moment, you cannot get that specific. We have a baseline sort of markup across the project. If you find out that you wanted to change the markup for the vendor, that's going to come from when you're clipping it or when you're adding the products in. But the helpful thing about putting your markup in the beginning of the project and sort of setting it as a default rate is that you're never going to miss it. So if you have, let's say, a junior designer and they're coming in and they're clipping a lot of things and they're not putting markup in, that sort of scope markup is going to carry over to that selection, which is just going to make sure that you're covered. So when you change your default rates, you could adjust these. You could decide you want to charge tax on shipping where you're at, and maybe where you're at, you also charge on labor, and you're not charging a markup. It's all very flexible. And then I can update all existing items. Keep in mind that you really want to set up these defaults at the beginning of the project, really before you get too far into your estimation or your scope building, because this is going to impact everything. And let's say you did a few design services and you didn't want to put a markup on it, you're going to have to change that afterwards. So I'm going to update all of these items. And when I do that, it's going to take a second. There you go. You'll notice that these two service items that I had originally, I didn't have any markup on them. So if you have items like that, which usually is, you only have a few of those, you just want to come in and change those so that you're not putting a 50% markup, on something like your design hours, because you should have that built in. So you can do it that way. Now, the other way that you can create fees on your projects is to come down to the bottom right here. But keep in mind the fees that are inside of these items, the markups, taxes, all of that, this is all going to be grouped together for the client. They are not going to see this markup. They're actually not even going to see like the breakdown of shipping or labor when you're putting it in this module. If you come down here and you decide to put fees on your project, this would be very transparent to the client. They would see that I have, a design fee of 25% on this project. And that's going to apply the 25% on top of everything that's in this project. And that's a perfectly fine model to use. And actually, you can use a combination of both if you want to. So you may have products that you're marking out because you're buying wholesale, but then you're making your design fee by putting a percentage at the bottom. You could do that. And you can add as many fees as you want. You could do, profit, overhead, small tools, surcharge. Like you can add multiple levels of fees here. And then also on top of that, if you're running a design build firm, you might be having a general liability insurance, in which case it's calculated a little bit differently and it kind of goes into that. So you can add in that general liability insurance here as well. So that may not be applicable to everyone on the call, but just know that that is there and it can help you calculate it. You can also add in a flat fee here. I recommend adding flat fees in general to your scope of work. And that's just because it makes it a little bit easier to invoice for it, especially if you're invoicing for percentages. But it's an option if you wanted to put it down here at the bottom. So Kim, I'm not sure if that answers your question. If you have follow-up, feel free to chat or unmute and let me know. Happy to dig into that a little bit deeper. But it's pretty straightforward for the most part. You just want to make sure that you have those set up at the beginning. Again, it's the gear icon right here. This is where you're going to find a lot of settings for your project. And you want to edit your default rates. And you can update only new items, but usually you're going to want to apply that to everything. Great. So Kim says that's good. All right. So now we have gotten some quotes in there. We've gone a little bit backwards here. Sorry, guys. We have sent some selections over to our client for approval. We have, even gotten some of these paid for, which I didn't actually cover. So we can go over that now. We're going to go through how you can invoice, collect retainers, all that good stuff. If that sounds totally boring, you can just drop boring in the chat and let me know. But we'll go over how to invoice for some of this because I think it is really important that you understand, especially as you're getting familiar with the system, how this works. So right now, what I have is I have a few invoices on this project because I was messing with it earlier in a demo, but I can come in and let's actually just clear these out so I can redo all of this. I'm going to show y'all how this works. Okay, so we're starting fresh. This is the first time that we're invoicing for this project. We are starting fresh here. Again, I'm kind of going a little bit mix match in steps here. Oftentimes, a lot of y'all are going to be collecting money up front, right? So you want to collect a deposit, you want to collect a retainer. You may even be doing that in an earlier contract phase. So right now I'm going to come in and let's just say at first I want to collect a retainer. And this is because I'm ready to get started. I want to collect a design retainer as we start to really spell out what this project is going to look like. And I want to make sure that I'm covered. So we're going to do, initial design retainer here, and we're going to collect $15,000. And this is just, again, to make sure that we have some funds in the bank as my team starts to work on this in the off chance that maybe this client walks away or doesn't want to move forward with the project. So you should also note that you can accept payment through Materio using our Stripe integration. And we also have the ability to integrate with QuickBooks Online, which is a little bit of a deeper conversation, but you can move invoices to QuickBooks and collect payment over there, or you can just send them through Materio and all of that is going to be automatically synced into QuickBooks. So those are two very different options. And, happy to dive into that if others have questions, but generally speaking, you can collect payment through Materio. Now, if you're getting started, I do want to be very upfront with, if you're getting started with a new Stripe account, you've never had a Stripe account before, there's going to be some restrictions on their end for you for a few months. That is to build credit. Oftentimes, that limit is going to be too low for most of the people using the platform. So I will just say the limits on are on ACH transfers, but they are not on credit cards and they are not on wire transfers. So if you need to collect anything over that limit and you're new to Stripe, just make sure you've turned on the wire transfer function. And also, if you do turn on credit cards, I always recommend the default, which is the client covers that fee, because it can get really pricey, but some clients do like to do that. So I'm going to send over this retainer and my client is going to get it. And for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to mark it as paid. Let's say that they wrote me a check and, there was a check number and I want to put a memo. And if you want to, I think it's a great idea, send them a payment confirmation. This is optional. You can turn it off and on. But I feel like if they wrote you a check, especially, it's good to just let them know, hey, I got your check. We've saved it. We've applied it to your account. It's all there. So now you'll see that I have a retainer available of $15,000. So now I feel like I'm kind of ready to get started. And again, I'm kind of flip-flopping here, but you probably want to do this at the beginning before you start to get all your products and everything set up and move forward with them. And Kim asked about the fee, but then answered it. It's at the bottom of the invoice. So when you go to see it, it spells out the fees right there really clearly for you. But we also have help articles about that go way in depth. So if you need more information about that, don't hesitate to reach out to our team, live chat us. You can always click help right here in the app, and we will get back to you with an answer or send over an article. Okay, so I have collected a retainer here, and now I'm actually moving forward with the project. I've sent over those selections, we've gotten them approved, and now we're really talking about getting some design work done here. So I'm going to send an invoice over. And in Materio, invoices are pretty flexible, and they're also sort of a one and done thing. So you send an invoice, you collect payment, things may change in your project. That's okay. We're going to keep track of that for you, and you're just going to send another invoice. So our motto is sort of close things out, get paid for it, make sure that it's, finalized as it is. And then once things change, we just help you cover your bases there. So I'm going to add in my project scope. On this, you'll notice that everything that is in my scope that has a budget can be invoiced for. So I could come in and I could actually invoice for part of my design fee, which is another way, by the way, to kind of collect that retainer, if you will. You can always come in and collect a percentage of your design fee. That's one option. But let's say I wanted to collect a deposit on all of my scope of work. Maybe I just want to collect 20% of everything at the beginning of the project as well. I can do that. Now I can add that to the invoice, and then I can come in and I can drag this around and decide how much of this I want to collect. If I wanted to defer collecting any tax on this, I could clear these out. If you're using our deposit function, there's a little checkbox which makes deferring revenue much easier. Usually invoices are sort of a final billing document, but I can come in and collect this and add it to the invoice. Now you'll notice that some of these items have pictures and information and some of them don't. And that's because some of them have been approved and some of them have not. So that's just one thing to note. When items are approved, they will show up here with a picture. Now, you can also always come in and add other things here. You could go back and add other project scope. You could add in expenses. If you're, let's say you've been printing out floor plans and you want to add those in, you could add those in. Hours log, if your team is tracking your time, often that's sort of its own like monthly invoice, but you could add those in here as well. I don't think I have any billable hours on this project because it's new, but those will come in here. And then you'll also notice that because I was showing you guys the example of the design fee at the bottom of the project, my design fee is showing up right here. So if you have any fees at the bottom of your project, any percentage fees, you have the ability to turn this off and on. So you don't have to necessarily always charge for that design fee. If you have it there, there may be cases where you don't, like for instance, when you're billing for your hours or something like that, but you can turn it off and on and decide to collect with it. Now, in this case, I also want to apply some payment from a retainer that I have collected from before. So I only have $15,000 available, so I'm just going to go ahead and use all $15,000, and then I'm still going to have a balance on this invoice. So it's okay. When your client gets it, they'll see, hey, we've applied the retainer and you still have a balance. So I'm going to send this over and send it that way. So also to note, if we're getting really into invoicing here, you can come in, you can print this, edit things, all of that is here. If you wanted to view what your client sees, This is what they would see. Depending on what options you've turned on, they can pay by card, they pay by ACH, whatever it is. And then you can kind of go back to the project here. We'll go back to our screen here. So you can also resend it if for some reason you need to send a reminder or let them know that's there. You'll also notice that because I have QuickBooks connected, for the ones that have synced, it will tell me that it's up to date in QuickBooks, and it will also give me a link to open that up in QuickBooks. So definitely, if you're exploring QuickBooks as an option, would love to hear more about how you're using that and what you need. So right now, Kim's asking if you can edit the items in an invoice before you send to the client, i.e. the price or the tax, or does it have to be done before pulling into the item? So actually, in this way, you'd have to edit it. It would change it back to a draft. And this is one of the things we're actually working on making a little bit more flexible in Materio right now. This is all stemming from the item. And so in this case, unfortunately, you would have to delete the item and then re-add it. You'd have to edit it here. Or you'd have to edit it from the actual selection itself. So let's say you did purchasing first and you wanted to push that cost along to your client, or if you did it after, either way, let's say, this price was different, you'd have to come in, revise this price, update it to be, maybe it was, $240 or whatever, and you actually wanted to pass that on to your clients. You could do that, save this item only, and then you would need to invoice them, re-add it to the invoice. So I'd come in and I would delete, now of course I forgot, I think I did this one. So I delete that one. And then I would go back in, add more items from my scope of work here, pull it back in, next, do the 20% that I was wanting to collect, and then add it to the invoice again. So that's how you would have to do that. It's a little bit of a manual process at the moment to edit anything. So I think just knowing that in advance of us creating a better way to do that, just make sure that your pricing is there. And then the good news is, if you forgot to do that and you sent an invoice for some reason, and then you went back and changed the price later, once you add it to the invoice again, it's going to go ahead and just show you the difference of what you're missing there. So let's see. The other thing is you want to, there's a lot of other ways to track the payments. Again, if you're doing this through Stripe, it's automated. But if you did a wire transfer, let's say outside of Stripe, just through your regular bank account or other methods, bank draws, etc., you can select those there and save payment. Is there a process for getting change orders approved for labor cost? Jen is asking if there's a process for getting change orders approved. All right, so in Materio, let's talk about change orders. In Materio, to create a change order, your project actually has to be live. Oh, look, I guess we got a feature update while we're in our training. So if I go to my project right here and I click the three dots, what I'm going to do is update the status to live. Now, the reason that you have to do this to initiate change orders is because we're sort of assuming that when you do that, you've signed a contract and you've kind of locked in your scope of work. So now if I came in and I wanted to adjust, let's say this electrical labor, let's say we got a quote and it went up and we changed the price again. Maybe it's $5,900 now, and I hit save. Materio is going to ask me if I want to add this to a change order. And that's because it knows that I had locked in that scope of work. My project was live. And so if I'm making any changes to items that are not selections, just things like labor or things that aren't, an allowance, it's going to ask me if I want to add it to a change order. So in this case, I would say yes. It's going to initiate that change order, and then it's going to add it right here. Now you can add as much as you want to this change order. You may have just gone to the site, had a conversation with the client, things were starting to change. You can actually do this from your mobile app. You can initiate change orders. You can even mark the plans if you want to add scope, all of that. So you can do that from your mobile app. You can send it, or you can do it from here. Now I'm going to review and send it over to my client. You could write a note, hey, we talked about, this changing today, need sign off. So I can send that over to them. It's going to let them know what the changes are, how the fees have changed, whatever's changing. You can force finalize this if you want to. I do not recommend this unless you absolutely need to, but your client is going to be waiting to review this. and they're going to get that change order in the system. Now I'll show you what that looks like from their end. Let me open up this portal. Okay, so this is this same project, but this is in the client view. So I see here that I have a change order waiting for my review. So I'll click that. Also get an email that will take me to it. I can come in, look at the item. If I need to find out more information, there might be notes there. I can then sign it and approve it. Once I sign and approve it, it's going to be confirmed and it's just going to merge into the scope of work as normal. If I wanted to review this as a client, I could go over here to scope changes and I would be able to see my change order, that I signed it, when I signed it, etc. You're also going to be able to see this from your account as the firm. So this is how the change orders are going to show up, and they're just sort of going to merge into scope of work. And then I will show you, Jen says, love it. Great, I love it. So then we're going to hop back over to our account and we'll show you what that looks like for billing purposes. Sorry, y'all, I'm flipping between things. So now that I have this merged in, it was approved. It's just you don't see anything. It's there. You'll get a notification. Anyone who's following the project is going to get an email. You know, Mary Beth approved the change order. It's going to have a summary there. So any of your field team, maybe your superintendents are following the project, they're going to get that notification on their phone. They're going to get an email about it. They can adjust those settings, but they will be notified. And again, in the finances and then scope changes, it's going to show up right over here. So if you have questions about what's changed, it's going to be there. Now, when it comes to invoicing for change orders, I think that was part of the original question. If you had already collected money for this line item, and I should have done this first, but if you went ahead and let's just collect an invoice for the electrical labor. Oh, I did collect some of it. So let's just say I wanted to bring it back up to 50%. You'll see that because the price has increased, getting it up to 50% is going to increase the amount that I need to collect. So it's going to add that in for me, and it's going to let me know what's remaining on that. So again, Materio is just tracking the difference in the item cost. And if you've invoiced for it, there's not an explicit at the moment, like add that change order to an invoice, but what you would do is go in and add those items that you know you just had in a change order and send over an invoice for them. You could title this, you know, change order number 1 payment or something like that. And you would send it over. I think in the future, we'll probably have a more explicit document for change orders. Right now, we've sort of created this like fluid, merging into the scope, you know, type of thing. I think there are some pros and cons to that. So just being totally honest, eventually, my hope is that we have a more clear way to add that to an invoice. But for now, you could just look at what was changed, add it to the invoice, or just kind of keep up your regular billing cadence and know that as you close out, you know, all the items, Materio is going to keep track of that for you. So we have about 5 minutes left. I think what I want to do next is sort of cover how you can get this project out of your hands and sort of into the field. I think that might be helpful, sort of wrapping up as much as I can in an hour, you know, kind of going through an entire project. But when I, you know, am ready to share with a collaborator, and this could be in a few different moments in the process, right? This could be that you're working with a general contractor, you're just the design firm, and you need to bring in a general contractor and you need them to look at every single thing that you've got here and you want them to put the construction estimate in. In that case, you know, you would invite them in as an external collaborator. You could add in them with, you know, full edit access and all of that. You could really give them partnership over this project, if you will. So that's one way. And that may be the moment that you share with a contractor and then you never have to use what I'm about to show you. But I think the thing that happens most often is contractors, if they're separate, may have their own system and they don't want to look at another system at the moment. And so you just need a way to share with them. And if you are managing subcontractors, you want a way to share with them without them having to log in, but you want to give them the information that they need in order to get the job done. So in that case, what you would do is create these view only links. So this is a great way to create live links to the project that you can share once. And if they go to it and things have changed, it's obviously live, so they're going to be able to see it. So I could come in and I might want to call this electrical. I might want to say, okay, I just want to share the electrical, and maybe I, don't want to share any of these boards. I just sort of want to share a few of these plans. I don't even need the elevations. We're going to save this, and what it's going to do is generate a link that you can copy, and so I can paste this up here so you can see what that looks like. This plan is not super covered up with markers right now, but you'll see they can see the chandelier. If things are approved here, they would be able to see that. So let's actually do an approval. Close out of this real quick. Let's approve some things. And yeah. Now if we come over and we refresh this, we should see like these two items are approved. They can click in, they can see those files that you attached to that product when you were clipping it. Let me click this one. They can see those installation instructions and whatnot there. They can see a picture of it. And then if it's marked on the floor plan, they can come in and they can see exactly what those items are, where they're going, and they don't have to log in to do that. So this is a great way for them to see that information without having to question where it goes, without you having to communicate, hey, these are both going to go on the left. Now you can add in notes and be more specific about spacing and things that you want or specs. But generally speaking, this is going to be enough to get them started, and it's going to be live. Now, the other cool thing about this is that when you view those links, you can also print the QR code. And a lot of people love to do this. It's going to have your logo on it, the project name, all of that. And you can laminate this, or you can put it into a binder, and you can put it on the job site, you can tape it up on the walls. And this is a great way for different trades to see different work. Again, it's going to link them to it. They don't have to log in, and it's going to be live. So this is great for handoff, great for making sure that if something changes, and they scan that link, it's going to be good. Now, I will say, obviously, you have to rely on a human to want to scan this and to look at it. And so if you change something and they don't refresh, they're not going to be getting notifications about changes like they would if they were invited into the project. So I always recommend, if you're working with like an outside firm, inviting the superintendent or field supervisor or GC, as an actual collaborator to the project, because that just means they're going to get updates, real-time updates, and they're going to know when things have changed. So those are a few of the options of getting it out. All right, we're at time. Actually, right as I said that, we're at time. I know that I went through a lot of stuff today and we didn't quite go in the perfect order, but hopefully this has been really helpful. If you have questions for next week's training, Claire is asking this, you can just go and book the live training again. Claire, I can follow up with you with a link if you need that. I think we also have a link on our site. Let me just email you a link to that. When you fill out the training session form, you can submit your questions there. And if you have other questions that you come up before that, you can always just email a list of questions to hello@materio.co and say, questions for next week's training, and we'd be happy to have them. It's always great to get those questions in advance of the call so we can have a more structured demo or training session and dive in a little bit deeper. So if this didn't cover your questions that you had today, please resubmit those, email us over those questions, and we'd be happy to dive in or even schedule one-off training